like to welcome everybody participating and watching this May 26, 2020 Matthews Board of Commissioners meeting. I'd like to start with introductions. Today we have with our elected officials, Mayor Pro Tem Renee Garner, Commissioner Jeff Miller, Commissioner John Urban, Commissioner Dave Bland, Commissioner and Reverend Larry Whitley. And you're not going to wave? Thank you, Larry. And Commissioner Ken McCool. Also participating, we have Town Attorney Charlie Buckley, Assistant Town Manager Becky Hawk, Town Clerk Lori Canapino, and Town Manager Hazen Blodgett. All right. Sorry, my phone's ringing there. Due to Mecklenburg County's COVID-19 stay-at-home order, this meeting of the Matthews Board of Commissioners will be conducted remotely using the Zoom virtual meeting platform. The town of Matthews is committed to transparency and robust public participation during these challenging times. Would like to review how we're going to vote tonight. Myself and the commissioners will vote on each item by roll call vote. I will call on each commissioner and ask how you vote, and you will indicate in the affirmative or negative, and also raise your hand as I call on you. We're going to move on tonight. The meeting is called to order. We'll move on to the agenda item number 2, our moment of reflection from Commissioner Dave Bland. Dave?
Mayor, member of council, I would like to share with you tonight it's a book of poems that my mother gave to me back a number of years ago, and that has particular meaning to me in this time of the coronavirus and a lot of people trying to help each other out. It's called The House by the Side of the Road. It's written by Sam Walter Voss. There are hermit souls that are withdrawn in the place of their self-content. There are souls like stars that dwell apart in a fellowless firmament. There are pioneer souls that blaze their paths where highways never ran. But let me live by the side of the road and be a friend of man. Let me live in a house by the side of the road where the race of men go by. The men who are as good, and the men who are bad, as good and bad as I. I would not sit in the scorner's seat or hurl the cynic's ban. Let me live in a house by the side of the road and be a friend to man. I see from my house by the side of the road, by the side of the highway of life, the men who press ardor of hope, the men who are faint with strife. But I turn not away from their smiles nor their tears. Both are parts of an infinite plan. Let me live in my house by the side of the road and be a friend to man. I know there are brook-gladdened meadows ahead and mountains of wearisome height, that the road passes on through the long afternoon and stretches away to the night. But I still rejoice when the travelers rejoice and weep with the strangers that mourn, nor live in my house by the side of the road like a man who dwells alone. Let me live in my house by the side of the road. It is here the race of men go by. They are good, they are bad, they are weak, they are strong, wise, foolish, so am I. Then why should I sit in the scorner's seat or hurl the cynic's ban? Let me live in this house by the side of the road and be a friend to man.
Thank you. Very nice. Nice gift from your mother. Let's move on to agenda item number 3. We'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me if you care to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'd now like to recognize National Public Works Week. Jay's calling it up on the screen for us here. This is a proclamation I'd like to read into the record for National Public Works Week 2020. It starts here. Whereas public Works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life and well-being of the people, the town of Matthews. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services cannot be provided without the dedicated efforts of public work professionals who are engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of government and the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. Whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in the town of Matthews to gain knowledge of and to maintain a progressive interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their community. Whereas the year 2020 marks the 60th annual National Public Works Week. Now, therefore, I, John F. Higdon, Mayor of Matthews, do hereby designate the week of May 17th through the 23rd, 2020 as National Public Works Week. And I urge all our people to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies in activities, events, and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protecting our national health, safety, and quality of life. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the great seal of the town of Matthews, North Carolina, to be affixed this 26th day of May 2020. This being one of the more interesting parts of having a Zoom meeting, as I believe I read, it starts here as my instruction that I should begin reading that it starts here, but we're very happy to recognize Public Works last week, and we couldn't do it till I didn't have this proclamation ready to this meeting, but thank you very much. I believe we're going to have some words from CJ O'Neill, our Public Works Director. CJ, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
I am sorry. I had a great speech going there. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I just want to lift up a couple things that I know the Commissioners and the Mayor, you are all aware of this, but I want to lift it up to the public. Public Works is really a first responder similar to police and fire, and they support us in that as well. And generally, natural disasters, we are the first people on scene, and we're generally the last to leave. So when everybody's staying at home in their houses, trying to stay safe, we're out there clearing roads, shoveling snow, putting down sand and salts, and trying to make everybody's life easier. So I just want to lift that up. Thank you.
Thank you, CJ. I will reiterate, as I did in a previous meeting, I had the opportunity to work with some of your employees, some of our employees in the town Public Works Department after the tornado. Worked for about 4 hours with them and was pretty exhausted and tired, and came home and enjoyed lunch the rest of my afternoon and turned the television on at about 7 o'clock at night. Same crew I was working with were still out, still working, still helping the citizens of Matthews, and that's just kind of symbolic of the types of employees we have in our Public Works Department. So we very much appreciate them, and they're very well deserving of the proclamation I just read. We'll move on, as we do every week during these trying times, and get a update on COVID-19 from our Emergency Operations Center Commander, Rob Kinnenberg.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So as of today, Mecklenburg County has 3,316 cases and has suffered 74 deaths. That's up 50%. The cases is up 50% over the last 2 weeks, and the deaths are up 15% over the last 2 weeks. This increase is not unexpected given the increased rate of testing. We'll talk about that in a minute. As far as the town of Matthews, we have 45 residents in 14 locations, and both Carrington and Royal Park skilled nursing facilities are hotspots for outbreaks with more than 14 cases in each location. Please remember, we've been given these reports now for almost 2 months, and this is based on an isolation list we get from the health department. So it's not our data specifically, and cases roll on the list and roll off the list 30 days later. So we don't have an accurate tally, but we're keeping up with the current situation. The county's testing has ramped up over the last 2 weeks. We're testing more than 3 times the number of people we were previously testing in the county's goal to test 5% of the Mecklenburg County population in 30 days. We did move into phase 1 on May 8th. And we watched. We were given 2 weeks to see if the state could meet certain goals, which Mecklenburg County has been struggling with as an urban center. COVID surveillance was supposed to be up over 14 days. We were supposed to see a leveling or decrease over lab confirmed cases in 14 days, but that doesn't jive up with the triple the number of tests. Percent of tests returning positive should have declined, and the number of hospitalizations over the 14 days should have declined. Statewide, the governor felt that we'd met those measures, but in Mecklenburg County, we still struggle. We've seen hospitalizations slowly increase from the mid-50s to about 70 over the 2-week period. The number of patients on ventilators has crept upward steadily. The total number of people in the county on ventilators continues to creep up steadily, and the number of ventilators available for critical patients has declined slightly. We did move into phase 2, though, since we're under a statewide order. We moved into that 5 o'clock on last Friday. Key points there. We're still stressing social distancing and wearing masks. Restaurants and bars are permitted to operate at 50% capacity with dine-in on-premise eating. We continue to look at our at-risk populations and our congregant living facilities. Retail is allowed to operate at 50%, provided they can meet some social distancing and transmission precautions. Churches were initially restricted during phase 2, but some clergy filed a suit and won an injunction. So churches are allowed to operate at capacity. Bars and breweries were not allowed to open, but they too have seen guidance over the weekend that allows them to open at a reduced capacity. Guidance has been provided for youth sports activities, but gyms and sports facilities are still closed. However, they are filing suit to reopen. I mentioned the county's testing plan. Again, our state goal is to test 5% of the population, about 55,000 people during 30 days. Over the last several days, we've averaged right around 1,800 tests a day between the hospitals and public health. Our goal at the end is to test about 90,000 people across the county, which represents about 9%. Matthews activities to date. We worked last week to devise a plan to reopen town government. We reopened town facilities, including town hall, and brought back our furloughed employees as of today. Most of our activities are resumed, although they are under a modified schedule. Each department head was asked to devise a plan to how to bring their employees back, still maintaining social distancing, and bring our services back up gradually. Matthews, on a countywide level, Hazen continues to participate in the business roundtable discussions. Police and fire continue to provide and receive protective equipment from centralized warehousing. police department and fire still have a presence in the EOC. And we now can participate in a conference call 3 days a week instead of our previous 7 and then 5. We continue to maintain contact with Royal Park, Liberty, Plantation Estates, and Windsor Run, so we know what's going on there. And we're trying the best we can to come back to normal operations and maintain social distancing as much as we can. So that is my report.
Do you have any questions, Commissioner Miller?
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor. To the Chief, we understand that the COVID cases should have declined. My question is, should they decline, since we're ramping up testing, should they decline by percentage therefore?
The percentage of people testing positive still remains about 7.5%. What we're somebody who's got COVID and know they have COVID, that's a no-brainer. They're going to have a fever. They're going to feel like crap. What we're finding during the testing is the asymptomatic COVID positive patient. Never had any signs or symptoms, but they are testing positive.
Thank you.
Are any other questions for Rob? Okay, seeing none.
Briefly, Mayor, if I can, I'd like to thank you for your comments to Ridge Church in your interview, for the fine work that the police, fire, and me, thank you, are doing managing through COVID. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Well, I was just going to mention that now that you brought that up, but I would like to say that Pastor Chris Brown at Ridge Church asked if he could interview me for a presentation to his congregation this past Sunday. And we spoke on a variety of topics, but they have a program at Ridge Church where they recognize members of our community that are just doing an outstanding job and helping us during these difficult times. And he asked me, did I know of anyone that fit that bill? And Rob Kinnenberg is the first name that I immediately thought of. Rob briefly alluded to the fact that he was on these EOC calls 7 days a week. I've been on several of those calls. It's very obvious to me that Rob is very well respected. He's very articulate and well respected, and not only in Matthews but the entire county. But Rob, we thank you and all the employees that work for you, and of course our police and employees as well. But for all that you've done during this trying time, you're very, very deserving of some recognition. So thank you, Rob, and I hope everyone that sees you gets the opportunity to congratulate you. I think it's an honor well deserved.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Move on to agenda item number 6. Mr. Manager, do we have anything to add to the agenda tonight?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to add to the agenda an item to discuss when we want to begin opening the meetings to the public and meeting back at Town Hall.
Okay, we'll add that under new business, 13D. Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll move on then. Lori, do we have any public comment? Anybody sign up for public comment?
Do not have any public comment, Mayor.
Okay, no public comment. We'll move on to agenda item 8, recess the regular meeting for public hearing on fiscal year 2021 budget, CIP, and fee schedule. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Whitley, a second by Commissioner Miller. We'll do a roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley.
Yes.
Commissioner McCool.
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Commissioner Bland. And I vote affirmative as well, so that passes unanimously. We now have recessed our regular meeting and sit in on a public hearing, as I just discussed. Hazen, would you like to do this presentation?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, I would do. Okay, we'll get to the screen. Okay. So we're going to go over the presentation to the board. And for the public's information, the board held its first work session last Monday, and we held another one today at 5:30 here. So I'd like to go to slide number 2, and this will be a quick recap. There you go, of the budget we're currently in that will expire on June 30th. All right, so we right now we are at a 28-cent property tax rate. Our fund balance for the 19 fiscal year, which is the last audit we have, was over 34%. We didn't fund any fund balance. No fund balance was appropriated in the budget. And then we added 4 new positions in the police department, and we fully funded the fire and EMS 24-hour staffing model. In this year's budget, we are facing some very strong headwinds. COVID-19 is an unprecedented event, and it's impacted what we're forecasting for vehicle and sales tax revenue, sales or state allocated funding and investment earnings, as well as in our tourism fund, the meals and hotel motel tax. What we've done is and the board's aware of this, we've tried to absorb these increased costs, what we'll go over, and the revenue losses, while still providing a high quality service to our citizens that they've come to expect. There's no property tax increase being recommended in its budget, and there's no fund balance appropriation. At the May 18th work session, what the staff did was appropriate a merit increase of 3%, which is about, it would go into effect January 1st, 2021. However, I want to clarify, at tonight's 5:30 meeting, the board specifically directed staff to take that $174,000 and not put it into a merit increase line item, but instead put it into a contingency line item. And then at the December board meeting, December 2020, have discussions about the merit increase, look at the revenue picture, and make some decisions or discuss it at that time. So it is not a guaranteed 3% raise at January 1, 2021. In order to not budget any fund balance, we also reduced the 2 insurance premiums, workers' comp and property liability, because we've received some bids, and then we're anticipating some revenue from the library of $23,000. We are expecting more than that. And then a couple other items is we added $12,000 to Food Truck Friday as an expense, comes out of tourism funds. And each commissioner's compensation will remain the same. So today, it's at $5,200 annually, and that's going to stay that way in 21, and then we'll continue with the technology allowance. So there'll be no changes in commissioners' compensation. Some of the things that we are combating against are state retirement contributions have gone up. State health insurance has gone up. We just talked about workers' comp and property insurance increases. Solid waste is going up about $60,000. And then we had partially funded positions that we have to fully fund this year in 21. And so that's about $722,000 of new costs that have hit us in the 21 budget. Next slide. So here's a little history of our tax rate. And it's been at 28 cents for the current year and next year. And then in 19, we did do a revaluation. The budget does reduce by about $1 million, very, very close to $1 million. From 21 is $1 million less than fiscal year 20. Here's where our revenue sources come from. Property tax is 59%. That's a very stable, what they would call an elastic tax. Sales tax is 14%. That is much more elastic, but as a proportional share of our budget, obviously it's not as high as property tax. Then we have state shared revenues, and then we have other funds. POW bill, those are funds that go to roads as an example. All right, so we do we're setting aside, what do we, I want to make sure, the slide is not totally accurate based on the 5:30 discussion. So instead of a merit pool for employees, there will be an equivalent amount set aside in a contingency line item, and the board will discuss in December and make, or around that time, and make some final decisions on whether or not to deploy those raises at that time. We were able to implement what they call a stratified policing model in the budget. We're going to start that January 1st. We also included an advanced certification program for the Matthews Fire and EMS, and that'll help with retention on the fire side. And then we've expanded an employee assistance program for first responders, and we want to make sure they've been under a lot of stress, and we want to make sure we're taking care of their health physically and emotionally whenever possible. Okay, these are the budgets. So what we're recommending for 21. So the technology allowance is going to continue. We're going to continue the live stream for town board meetings. And then the citizen survey was delayed from 19, but it'll be planned in fall of 20, which is FY fiscal year budget 21. Under the manager's budget, we are going to continue the monthly digital newsletter. I know we use a lot of social media, but this has helped us reach our citizens. Last year, we implemented Love Matthews, and that was very successful. That's where we had the giant M. We want to roll something out for our folks this year, and then we will do some continued staff training. Under human resources, as mentioned earlier, we're projecting a 6% increase in health insurance premiums that are effective January 1. And as I've already mentioned, we're going to expand the employee assistance program for first responders. Finance, there's funds in there for us to get the, what is that? Governmental Finance Officers Association Excellence in Finance Reporting Award. The 19 audit, which is the latest one we have. The 20 audit we should see in October, but the fiscal year 19 audit shows a fund balance of 45.5%, which is about average for communities our size, and in an unassigned fund balance, which is particularly of interest to us because that has nothing tied to it. So in other words, if we want to convert that, that's almost 4 months of funding as a rainy day fund. And then we are experiencing some increases in our vehicle billing tax that the county sends out for us, and then banking fees. And one of the things we're going to do with the banking this year is we're going to go out for bids to potentially change banks. It's very healthy to do this periodically to make sure banks are sharpening their saw as much as possible. All right, information technology. Everybody's been a part of this, but we're going to continue the training for all of us about malware and cyber attacks. We've empowered Wayne Cogdell to be as sneaky and tricky as possible to replicate the bad guys because they are getting more and more sophisticated. And if anybody watches the news, they see all these communities that get hit and have gotten hit in the last year. We are having to budget $38,000 as a result of a budget error that we underfunded the phone and internet services last year. And then we've increased $7,800 for a fiber optic line to the telecommunications tower, which is close to the police department. All right, safety and risk management increase. There is still, even with the reduced rates that we've talked to the board, there's still an increase in workers' comp and property liability. It's as a result, well, at least workers' comp as a result of adding particularly firefighters. Police, as I mentioned, we're moving to a stratified policing model. Chief Pennington's been a big proponent of this since he's arrived here. It makes a lot of sense. It's a way to hold folks accountable. And we think it's going to be a great move. There's 7 vehicles as part of our replacement of our fleet. We're upgrading in-car cameras with the GPS and recording system. And we have eliminated 1 vacant telecommunicator position, really to make sure we could implement this stratified policing model, which is very important. In fire, as I mentioned, we are going to fund or implement an advanced certification program. It's a way for our first-line firefighters to obtain more training and certification, and then they will get increases in salary as they get certifications. One of the very painful things we had to do in this budget is we removed $40,000 from the Idlewild, from the allocation that we give Idlewild. The reason is this $40,000 has been going to payment of a fire vehicle that has been paid off. They wanted to see us convert that money into their operations. That was the original plan. And then as COVID evolved and continued to get whatever worse and worse, here's an example of what we had to cut out of the budget. We did explain it to Idlewild, and as you can imagine, they're very disappointed about this recommended change. Public Works. Historically, we have appropriated about $700,000 a year into into road paving. This year, we're proposing $800,000, or next year, I should say, or 21. While that is an increase, the folks that have come in and graded our streets are recommended that we appropriate $1.25 million a year. So we're still $450,000 low in that area. That's something we can talk about in mid-October of how we can get that up to a higher number. Stormwater, this is designated funds. People pay for this stormwater in their water and sewer bill. It's a very flat, continued budget. We are recommending to replace 1 vehicle and some other equipment. All right, sanitation. This is the Republic contract. It's about a $2 million cost. The $60,000 increase is tied to the CPI, which is about 3%. I think we go from April to April or March to March. Planning development, very flat budget, and it's just a continuation budget. Economic development, here's an example where we made some cuts. We're not proposing $20,000 for Red Brick. That's per their request. We also set aside, I believe it was $5,000 for EDACT, where we're eliminating that. And then the $5,000 is for the facade grant program that we've had good success with in the past. Parks and Recreation, we are this budget shows revenue expenditures are both based on full resumption on July 1st. And we also appropriated $15,000 for equipment at a swing at Rice Road Park. Some of the other things, Levine Senior Center, $1,500. Historically, we give them $5,000. The reason that's lower is because we paid for the cost of LED lighting, which was like $8,500. And then we, as they agreed to, we just put less in the 21 budget to make up for that difference. Tourism grants, that's $77,000. That is down $6,000 from the current year, and that's because we give tourism grants. It's based on 5% of the previous year's collection. Matthews Alive is $60,000. Arts and Science Council $25,000. Matthews Historic Foundation $40,000, and then $15,000 to the chamber to handle our part of a tourism agreement. Next.
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
What happens to that? I know Matthews Live canceled this year. What happens to that 60,000? Is that still? Are we still giving that to them, or what's the?
That's a great question. So they've asked for that money about a month ago, and we sent it to them. And we also, this is about the same time of year, we bill them for 40% of the director's position. So I've asked our Parks and Recreation director to get together with the Matthews Alive chairperson, board chair, and let's sit down and talk about it, because because the money we just gave to them goes for the 2020 Matthews Alive.
Mm-hmm.
And then what they're paying as part of the salary is also for the 2020 Matthews Alive. So the money we're looking at is actually for 21. So, think about next year, but it's really a great question. Then on the CIP side, we're talking about $106,000 in public safety enhancements, mostly, or for the police department, to harden the police department. It was not built as a police department. It was built as a shell building. We need to harden that. Ames Street, those are community development block grants, CDBG. There's $1 million in grant we got, and then we had to put up, 12%. AEDs are automatic external defibrillators. Those have come in handy. We've saved a number of lives with that. $80,000 for downtown camera project. $184,000 for Sam Newell multi-use path. And then $330,000 is the Crestdale Road multi-use path. That's a $250,000 grant in state funding, $125,000 from the Senate, $125,000 from the House. And then we got $80,000 in recreation fee in lieu of. However, we've been told within the last couple of weeks that some of that money, the House money, has been put on hold because it was filtered through NCDOT. And then what we'd like to do is place an order for a rescue truck in January of 21, and then takes, 6 or 10 months to build a truck like that. And so the first payment wouldn't be due until fiscal year 22, but obviously we'll have a discussion about that in January.
Hazen, I've got a question. What is the contingency plan if we never get the $125,000 house money for Crestdale Road?
Well, we haven't let any contracts. So my recommendation to the board is we would not do the work until we knew we were going to get the money, or the board made a conscious decision to make up that, a voted decision to make up that 125 that the NCDOT has put on hold for right now.
We were promised that money, however, correct, from Raleigh?
Yes, sir. And in fact, we asked Representative Hunt to kind of chase that a little bit for us, and they said it's put on hold. I mean, DOT is in a terrible hole right now. But
How did they ever get their hands on the money? Thought it was a direct
yeah,
from the
so it's a
legislature
very,
to us.
yeah, it's a very long and sordid story. The Senate side came out from the Senate Pro Tem. It was in Senate Pro Tem's budget and it went right to us. Very clean path. On the House side, Representative Brawley started working on it. Then Representative Hunt got elected, two different parties, and it seemed that this, one party didn't want to help the other party, and somehow in the process, and I don't know all the details, but Representative Hunt got it for us through NCDOT. So I don't know if on the Republican side, if it could have come through the Speaker of the House office, but Representative Brawley, whatever, lost re-election and everything changed. Commissioner Whitley may have more insight into that than me.
Hazel, last April, a year ago, we were told, and I want to think the day was somewhere like April the 10th last year, the money was going to be released to us. And that was the last I heard, and I was under the impression, along with Representative Hunt, that the money was released over to Matthews. And just now, in the last 30 days, is when I found out that DOT still had the money. And I did not understand why they still had it when the money was told that it was being released last year before we got into this crisis to Matthews. I don't know why we didn't get that money, and that's where we are today. But the money was to be released on April the 10th of last year, thereabout. In those days, that was what was told to me, and that was what was relayed to you, along with CJ and from the DOT. Once they released that, and we should have the money.
So CJ's on the call too. As I recall, this was reimbursed funds. So it's an example where we front the money and then DOT reimburses us. If that is incorrect, I will send you guys an email correcting that, unless CJ wants to chime in.
Sorry, Jason. Yeah, that is correct. It is a reimbursement from NCDOT. So we have to expend the funds and then ask them for reimbursement.
Well, we come from a place where a man's word is his bond. If they gave us our bond a year ago, I'm gonna hold them to that, and I think the town should hold them to that, especially if the money was always allocated for this project. I believe firmly, if you tell a man you're going to do something, a department, and you have an agreement, no matter what comes down the road, now if they don't have the fund to pay it now, I can understand it. But a good word said, when we get back straight, we're going to reimburse town method, then we can move forward. Do you agree with that, Hazel?
Yes, sir. Okay, so the other things about changing funds to the tourism fund, we still have payments on the Uten Pottery property, the community center roof repairs. We budgeted for 3 years. We're going to do the downtown streetlight replacement to decorative lights. We're going to pay for that over 3 years. We're going to do some paving around Matthews Station Street, and we're going to do a Fullwood Theater sound system replacement, and that's going to cost us about $140,000 for 5 years. A vast majority of that is the paving project. And then we're appropriating $135,000 for a segment of the downtown multi-path loop. Again, all these are tourism funds, not general funds.
Hazen, I have a question, please.
Yes, sir.
On the hardening of the police department, it seems like a very large amount of money to put in. I don't remember if it was 4-inch bollards of steel with concrete in them or 6-inch. I've put in bollards for as low as $500 a bollard. I believe we were quoted something like $1,300 a bollard. And I do know that boulders are relatively inexpensive and prettier than bollards. Are we planning, or can I request that we plan to quote that job out on bollards and or boulders? And either myself or Commissioner Urban could assist with some of that.
So we can certainly bid it both ways. We had a staff discussion about that. I felt like the boulders would not look very decorative. I think they'd look out of place. I thought the bollards would be more professional. But, you know, we can both do it both ways. We can get some photographs and the board can decide. But last time we talked about it internally with the chief, that's at least where I landed, was I felt like the bollards give it a more professional, crisp look, but I may be wrong.
Oh, that's a cosmetic opinion, but just as an example, I put in dumpster corrals for a large dumpster at multifamily complexes, and it'll cost me $3,000 for an 8-foot tall vinyl 3-sided dumpster corral, and I have to put 2 bollards in the back and 2 bollards in the front edge, and it's $3,000. So if it's $2,000 a fencing, it's $250 a bollard, or if it's, you know, give or take, but $130,000 to strengthen or harden the police department seems a little bit high and in need of review.
Well, we'll take any of this. We'll bring back the proposal or bids so you guys can see what you're paying for.
Commissioner Urban, are you willing to get involved and help me with that or compare?
I'd be more than happy to help in any way I can. Hazen knows that. I will say, though, that there is a subtle difference between a bollard for a trash compactor or a dumpster enclosure and a bollard that's designed for fortification. A lot more reinforcing is below grade. You don't see it. Concrete footing is in place. So I could see where the expense of the footing for fortification would be different than a bollard that we normally associate with a trash truck or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question, Hazen, or maybe for Chief Pennington. Doesn't the hardening extend beyond just bollards?
Yes.
Aren't there some other components?
Yes.
It does, Mr. Mayor. It includes not only secure fencing, bollards, and also ballistic glazing. Something to remember is, you know, the staff office windows and where we work every day are approximately anywhere from 10 to 15 feet right off of the parking lot, with just a couple of trees protecting the staff. So that's where the bollards come into play. The ballistic glazing is something that we saw about a year and a half ago, came into play at CMPD when they had an assault there at their place. Showed they actually switched up to the ballistic glazing also, and it also with the secure parking. We do not have any secure parking right now protecting the staff or the fire department at Station 2.
Thank you.
All right, next slide. All right, what can I answer any questions?
Are there any questions from any of the commissioners? I'd like to make a comment complimenting the staff for coming back with a really tight and continuing tightening budget. We appreciate it. We're very hopeful that we can reward our employees with the 3% raise, but I think times are so uncertain with, I believe you said 14% of our revenue coming from sales tax. We don't know how that's going to affect, how COVID is going to affect our income going forward. So good job by staff. I also am very happy to see that there's no tax increase associated with this. That's good. Does anybody have any questions for Hazen or any of the staff members that are on right now? Commissioner Urban.
I think it would be remiss if we didn't mention to the public watching this evening that the town board and staff, the department heads and all have already been vetting this budget for quite some time now. So the fact that everybody's kind of quiet or mute doesn't mean that they haven't spent countless hours running through the budget, asking questions, submitting questions, and things like that. So I just want to be clear, just for the purposes of the general public, the Zoom meeting doesn't quite do it, but we've all been highly involved in it, and I know we've been tugging on Hazen's ear this entire time.
Excellent point, Commissioner Urban. Thank you for bringing that up. Is there anybody from the public that's on this call that would like to make a public comment about the budget?
Mayor, no one signed up in advance, so we do not have any public comments.
Okay. I would like to remind the public that you have an additional 24 hours to make comments, and these can be emailed to matthews@matthewsnc.gov or called into the town clerk, Lori, at 704-708-1222. Can we put that information on our website somewhere, Lori or Maureen?
We certainly can.
That would be great. So we'll put that information, and so if you would like to make a comment on the budget and you're in the public, you can go to our website and there'll be a link there on how you can do that. There's no other questions. I'll entertain a motion to reconvene our regular meeting.
So moved.
We have a motion by Commissioner Whitley. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Bland. I will now do a roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley.
Yes.
Commissioner McCool.
Yes.
Commissioner Bland.
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So now we are reconvened into our regular meeting. We'll move on to agenda item number 10, receiving a report from one of our advisory committees. Tonight, it's the Matthews Veterans Advisory Committee, and the chair is Tom Cannon. Is Tom on with us?
He is on, Mayor. Please give him a moment to get ready.
Okay. I hope everyone had a enjoyable Memorial Day and in some way was able to salute our veterans, especially those that have given the ultimate sacrifice for us. So.
Hi, Tom.
All right, let's try it again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you, Tom. Excellent.
Wonderful.
Tom,
thank you for giving me the opportunity to give you an update of what MBAC has been doing over the past 2 or 3 quarters, and to give you a proposal for a service flag public display project that we have been working on for about 6 months, and then to discuss future plans for the coming fiscal year. If you could move on to the next overhead, please. This talks about what we've done in 2020, some of the things we've accomplished. We recommended a Matthews Veteran of the Year. We recommended 2. Phil Mowery was chosen. He received the Mayor's Medal and a plaque to go with that. And we've encouraged the leadership of the town to support the Veterans Day celebration. And we added a second veterans display case located in the Chamber of Commerce. We published and distributed the MBAC trifold on 10 reasons to hire a veteran. We selected and funded a Queen City Honor Flight individual, Matthews veteran. And the individual was chosen, and the flight was getting ready to depart in May, but with the virus, it had to be delayed. So we believe Nico Iannelli, who manages this thing for the honor flight, believes it can be done safely within 3 or 4 months. So we have our candidate. Candidate's name is Robert Christ. So he's ready to go as soon as this can be handled. We went ahead and paid for it out of our budget earlier. we've developed a service flag display project for Trade Street for Veterans Day. We're going to talk about shortly. And we explored for quite some time potential veterans stepping stones project for Parks and Recs. We got to the point that it was getting difficult to decide where we're going, so we decided to delay that for a year or two. So if you'll move on, please. This is a new project that we want you to consider. We know Matthews is a military personnel, veteran-friendly town, and the town wants to be able to display that. So after about 6 or 7 months in working through this, we advised the mayor and the board to approve a project for the Mecklenburg service flag display. Going on Trade Street from East Matthews down to the fire station. And we'll be displaying annually during the week of national holidays, Veterans Day week and Memorial Day. We'll place fixtures on the existing light poles. And what we will be displaying initially are 4 sets of the military flags, or 3x5, plus the POW MIA flag. The flags were made in the U.S. with USA materials. There have been some questions about, are we using foreign materials or not? This is USA materials. You'll go into the next one, please.
Tom, it didn't look like the Army was listed on there. Was that left out?
Oh, flip back to the previous one, please. USA, U.S. Army, U.S. Marine Corps.
Gotcha. All right.
Okay.
U.S. Army.
All right, this gives a view of what the flags would look like. This happens to be at the train crossing on Trade, with a couple of our flags superimposed with someone's magic with being able to put things on a screen. But that shows an idea of what they would look like. If you go on to the next one, please. And there's an overhead view going from Matthews Street down toward the fire station. So if you'll move to the next one. We're basically saying the first service flag display is proposed for Veterans Day, the week of 2020, or the year 2020, with Veterans Day week this year. Public Works is asked to do the installation of the brackets and flags, and we were fortunate enough to have help with Public Works to be able to determine the proper brackets that we need for the flags to be installed on the lamp posts. And get a cost for them so we could budget that. So the cost for this fiscal year ending at end of June for street from Matthew Street to John Street, the flags were, there's 4 sets of flags, $965, and we had a generous donation from a local individual that reduced our cost this year for this budget year to $200. The fixtures and the poles had worked out to $2,700. So with our current budget and previous donations to the MVAC over the past 3 years or so, we chose to be able to do this funding, and we could handle that, and that would consume the rest of our budget for this fiscal year and leave us about $500 left with the donations we have gotten in the past. Now, if the project is approved tonight, we propose an additional 2 sets under next fiscal year's budget from John Street to the firehouse. And the estimated cost for the fixtures is about $1,800. In summary, the project provides the town to show that it is a veteran and military-friendly town by visibly displaying during weeks of the 2 very important holidays the service flags of our military, to include POW and MIA. So we ask for your support in this endeavor. Are there any questions?
Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. I have a question probably for Charlie. Given the fact that it's a Memorial Day national holiday and a Veterans Day national holiday in November, I would think that this would also promote tourism of military families, particularly with an event that we would throw on both of those. Is that accurate, Charlie?
Well, we've got to think about that one a little bit. Commissioner Miller, I'm not sure of the answer to that. I understand your trend of thought, but we'll have to think about that one. But we will definitely look into that. And if it's possible, I'll report back to the commissioners.
Well, we just had a Memorial Day event in Stumptown Park, and we do have I believe, Hazen, correct me if I'm wrong, we do have a Veterans Day event as well. So it is tied into an event as far as the definition, but I'm just throwing that out.
Well, we do have a Veterans Day event as well, do we not?
I believe so. Hazen, you want to confirm?
So if in fact we can tie that into those two events, then I would think, yes, that would be subject to tourism funds allocations.
Thank you.
Just a point of clarification, neither one of those events do we put tourism funds into. So
okay.
I think the question was getting to was, could we use tourism funds for this? But for the two things we do not put tourism funds in either one of those.
But this is an enhancement of those events to promote tourism in this commissioner's opinion.
I think that we need to instead of just guessing, take a close look at this and get back with you shortly.
That'd be fine. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I tend to agree with Commissioner Miller. I think it would definitely encourage tourists to come to town, especially if we have the flags up. I think it would be something to elicit great pride from veterans from maybe other communities to come here. So,
and remind others that it's a special time of the year.
I cannot see the rest of the board with the presentation up. So does anybody else have a question? If you do, just please jump in.
I'll jump in. I have a technical question on the hanging of the flags. So what I'm seeing is you're hanging it like a regular flag, off of a simple mount. And all of our banners are set off of the top stanchion and the bottom stanchion, and they're all vertically oriented. Is the mount that you're proposing going to interfere with when they change it out to the vertical mounted banners that we use in the town? Or was there consideration given to following our format that we have so you don't have to purchase a mount and use our system of the top stanchion and the bottom stanchion?
We believe that, and in looking at it with Leif Fitzpatrick from Public Works, that the best way to do it was to put the mounts on the light poles about halfway up or so, and then install the flags at an angle. And so that is what we chose to do.
Okay. My suggestion would be is very simple to get a 3x5 foot cloth flag of anything and test one pole, because it might intrude or protrude more than we expect, and the bottom of the flag might actually end up going lower than, unfortunately, the ADA requirements for obstructions and objects. So it's best to mock one up and then see what it looks like.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things I think about in the General Assembly, what they call them is fiscal notes, and what they'll do when legislation is proposed, at some level, they'll bump it back to staff let them to kind of say, well, here's how much it would cost to do this. And the thing that I'm intrigued about is how much time does it take Public Works to take them down and put them up? Just so you guys know that number going forward.
So is your suggestion, Hazen, that we not vote on this tonight?
I would not recommend voting on it. I think there's a question of use of tourism dollars. I know we all like using tourism dollars. And then, kind of unanticipated costs. I think you guys need to be fully aware, make sure you know what you're getting into.
Commissioner Miller.
I'm having a hard time understanding the unexpected cost. The fixtures were spec'd out by the town. They're going on existing light poles. The flag holders are at an angle, and the flags will go in and hang at an angle.
I think it's the labor to hang and remove. Am I right?
Sir.
I would like to suggest that if we already have a top and bottom bar and we do a 2-foot by 18-inch banner that says "Welcome to Matthews" or something like that, I would wonder if that's a standard size that's not 3 by 5. If the military banners could be the same size, possibly. Is that an idea worth vetting?
Just a comment is my opinion. I think the military flags look more appropriate hanging, as Mr. Cannon has suggested, rather than hanging totally vertically. When you see those flags, they're usually at an angle. That's how they're presented typically.
Okay.
When we talk to, as we have gone through this project over the past, since October or November or so, we talked about various configurations and decided that the one that we've come up with, in which they're sitting at an angle and the flag is draped down, is the best one we could come up with. So that's what we're recommending.
I sat in. Can I?
Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
I sat in on the Veterans Advisory Committee meeting. I don't know if it was the last one before COVID-19. And I thought there was another slide that showed the way that the flags were hanging, and I felt like it was aesthetically suitable for military recognition. And when they were talking about the fixtures and how they've worked with the town, we also talked about how that whole area is going to have new light poles going up soon, and to their benefit, I believe it would be easier at that time to get the brackets put on in place. But there was a lot of discussion about, I think, if I remember correctly, it was one of Mr. Christ was the one who talked to Public Works about how the brackets would work and how they would work with.
Yes, he did. That was his project. Our thought was hanging them or displaying them the way they would be displayed would be the most proper way of doing it for the military flags, instead of hanging them vertically. The thought was we can put the brackets on the existing poles, and it's my understanding that the poles right now that exist are not being replaced. The fixtures, the light fixtures on the poles are being replaced, but not the poles themselves. And so when it was researched by Public Works to look at what's the easiest way, the best way of doing it, that's why we came up with the fixtures that we got and are proposing to put on. Obviously, there's no major rush to put them on because they don't have to be there until the November Veterans event. But the sooner we can fund them, especially with this year, before our funds run out, for the money that we have left, I would like us to be able to commit those dollars. Moreover, the money for next year, we need to talk through also at some point. But
Commissioner Miller.
A point of clarification for CJ O'Neill. I thought that we paid for the poles, new poles as well. Am I wrong?
Just the fixtures.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. No, we did not pay for new poles. We're just paying for new tops on the poles. If we paid for new poles, we'd have to pay an entirely new rate, which was like 3 times our current rate.
Great. I'm glad to hear we saved some money. Are there any existing angle brackets on the existing street poles then?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I think the answer is no, and that's what we're proposing to have installed.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? And again, just chime in if I can't see everyone. Anybody have any further questions? Because I have a comment or two to make.
I just wanted to make one. Yeah, I wanted to make one more comment, and that I was impressed when I visited with the Veterans Advisory Committee, because when you get, that number of regimented people in a room, they consider all facets of everything they're discussing in a way that that we could all learn from.
Thank you. I agree. I believe it's probably our most organized advisory committee. A couple comments I have. I suggest that we table this until at least our next meeting and see if we can, one, use tourism funds. CJ, perhaps you can weigh in on, although it sounds like it's already been discussed at length with staff, but you can weigh in on, the angled brackets versus hanging something from the top. But again, it'd be my preference to see them presented as Mr. Cannon has suggested. The other thing that was brought up here that was kind of interesting, and I've heard this from quite a few different individuals. If you notice, this recommendation is buying American flags and military emblematic flags that are made in the United States. I'm sure those are more expensive. But it's something that we might want to consider for the town. We buy American flags. I don't know how many American flags we buy in a year, maybe 1 or 2, or I don't know how many we have in town, honestly. But I do like knowing that it's a small thing, but I like knowing that our flags are made in America and not printed in mass in China or something like that.
Agree.
Mr. Mayor, help me understand something, please.
Yes, sir.
If you're discussing tabling this to your next meeting.
Yes, sir.
And discussing potentially using tourism funds. We had planned on using our own funds from our budget. If tourism funds are available, then we would not consume our funds, and the funding would come from basically a different pot, I guess. Am I confused or?
No, I don't. I think there was a portion. Was that for next year's budget that you're asking the town to fund? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Well, I mean, obviously you can spend your own funds now however you wish. Whatever you're asking from the town, we'd like to see if we can use tourism funds, because that's just a nice clean funding source for us. That's been it's like our little piggy bank off to the side.
I was confused. I understand.
And I think there was another ask by the town manager to determine the cost for putting these up and taking them down. I can't imagine it's too much I know it has to be done safely, but you're essentially sliding a flag into a bracket that would literally take less than a minute, I would think, per pole to quickly slide a flag in and secure it in a bracket. So I don't think seems like that would be much easier than even hanging the overhead banners where you have to block the whole street off and all that. I mean, just sliding a flag into a bracket seems like a pretty, maybe I'm wrong. CJ, would you like to weigh in on that?
Mr. Mayor, no, not without talking to staff first. I do want to weigh in, though, on the American flag. We do purchase all our flags from a company that I think is in Concord. that makes their own flags. So they are all made in America.
As long as the Concord place isn't importing them from China.
They make their own flags, sir.
Excellent. That's great. Okay, so I think it's, speak up if not, but I believe it's a consensus of the board to revisit this at our next meeting. Tom, I would say there's probably a pretty, speaking for myself again, but I think there's probably a pretty strong likelihood the town would fund this. We're just going to decide what bucket that we can get the funding from, unless CJ and Hazen come back and say, wow, this is going to cost, hundreds of dollars per flag to put up and take down or something like that, which I don't expect. So.
Understood.
So, Tom, do you have anything further for us tonight?
I'd like to talk a little bit about what we're going to do, what our plans are for 2021 fiscal year, starting in July. We'll continue to serve in the advisory capacity to the town, to the mayor and board of commissioners for items dealing with veterans per our charter and our bylaws. We will lead the Matthews Veterans Program of the year again. We'll fund the Queen City Honor Flight for one Matthews veteran resident probably next May. Flying the military service flags that we've just talked about for 2 national holidays, and fund the service flags from John Street to the fire station. And now there's something that's a little new. Some towns do it, as I understand, and that's flying the U.S. colors at a town hall for a day for someone special, like the Veteran of the Year or the Honor Flight awardee. Woodmen of the World donated to us 2 sets of U.S. colors, new, that we have, so there's no cost for us. And the vision would be for the Veteran of the Year, the flag would go up in the morning, fly over Matthews during the day, and come back down in the evening, probably needing a Boy Scout or someone like that who knows how to properly fold the colors, because I'm not sure any of his veterans could do it, but fold the colors and award it to the Veteran of the Year. And that's where the details still need to be worked out. But one thought would be, it would be given to the town board, and the town board would award it to the Veteran of the Year. As I said, details still need to be worked out exactly when it's going to be. Veteran of the Year sometime around Veterans Day, but all those details need to be done. But as far as the cost is concerned, we have the colors, so that's not an issue. So that's something we're still exploring. We've got one of our people who are leading that. We want to keep the veterans display cases filled with important information for our veterans. We continue to get those from the Veteran Service Organization for Mecklenburg County that Janine McGee used to run before her unfortunate passing, but we have good relationships with that organization, so we get that information monthly when they do their Veterans Council meeting that we send a person for. We'll support the Memorial Day and Veterans Day events by the American Legion, and we're looking at reprinting either or both of our trifolds. Our standard Matthews trifold, we had an assignment over the past couple of months, and to look at it and say, does it need to be updated? And several people have found some things that are no longer quite correct. So one of our people are looking at our sponsors and things of that nature, and we may end up funding that type of thing out of our coming budget for next year. And so basically that's where we are. I understand from the town that MVAC has been, that the town manager is requested $2,500 for a budget for the coming year. I'm not sure whether that played out or not, but that certainly would help us make some of these things happen as we move into the year. And let me say one thing. I want to give a big thank you to Lori Canapino and Teresa Chance for helping us get on the way again, because we were rightfully dead in the water with a virus for 2 months. But based on what you all are doing, they set up a virtual meeting for us that we had earlier this month to get us on the way again. Trying to catch up on what we wanted to be doing this year, trying to make it happen. And I firmly believe we made good headway on this fiscal year. With another month to go, we've got some budget issues we need to talk through and some other things. For example, officer elections for our bylaws are to be held in June. And we're not even close to that yet, so I'm not sure how that's going to play out. But if it doesn't happen next month, it will happen in the month or two later on. But I think we're making good headway. But I wanted to thank Lori and Teresa for helping us get underway. Because we are, instead of being dead in the water, we're on the way with Way On, and I'm very happy. Thank you for the help.
Thank you, Tom. I'm sure they appreciate that, and it's well deserved. So thank you very much. You know, when you were talking about possibly flying a flag over Matthews for the Veteran of the Year, it reminded something I saw on television a while back where they fly flags over the U.S. Capitol. Some of you may have seen that, but they literally have a person on top of the U.S. Capitol that just runs flags up the poles. They stay at the top for 1 second, come down, and then they can sell it as a flag flown over the U.S. Capitol. And there's somebody that's their full-time job is putting the flag up and down, and it flies for literally maybe a second. It comes back down.
Well, we hope that we can do this for a full day, 2 times. Yeah. But again, the details need to be worked out how that's going to play out.
Yeah, well, you have to work with staff with that. Thank you, Tom. Does anybody have any final questions for Tom, and we'll move on if not? Looks like everybody's good. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Good evening.
Move on to item 11, the consent agenda. We will have a roll call vote. I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner McCool. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mayor Pro Tem Garner. I'll call a roll call vote now. Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Commissioner Bland.
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley.
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Commissioner McCool.
Yes.
And I vote affirmative as well, so that passes unanimously. Thank you. Move on to item 12, unfinished business. Consider the Stevens Creek Nature Preserve sub-area study. I believe we have Layuba Zuyeva. I'm sure I'm massacring that name. I apologize in advance. And also Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and commissioners. I'm happy to be here today virtually to speak to you all about to provide an update on the Stevens Creek sub-area study draft plan. And
can you pronounce your name for us, please?
Yes. So my name is Luba Zuyeva, and I work with VHB. We were retained by the town to work on the sub-area study.
Very good. Thank you.
Great. And with that, I'm going to ask for the draft slides or the presentation slides to be pulled up. Thank you. Moving on to the study background slide. Thank you. So as a refresher, this item did come before the Board of Commissioners back in February, but it's been a couple months. There's been a little bit of a delay in the final adoption due to couple challenging months in between. So we're happy to be coming back here to you today, hopefully for final adoption. So as a refresher, this study was a result of this idea of trying to connect the town neighborhoods to the Stevens Creek Nature Preserve in a better way. The Nature Preserve was initially scheduled to open in the spring of 2020. Based on the latest information from Mecklenburg County staff, they're now expecting that the Stevens Creek Nature Preserve will actually open in the fall of 2020. They're kind of waiting to finish up some of the educational exhibits at the educational center. At the same time, there's also some design underway for Idlewild Road Improvements Project U4913 in the STIP that will bring significant changes to portions of Idlewild Road, including across I-485 interchange. And so there'll be sections of side path and sidewalk already constructed as part of this project, and a realignment of Stallings Road and Hooks Road to connect at a roundabout. So with those two factors coming together, it seemed like this was an opportune time for the town to consider how to better connect the neighborhoods in Matthews across Idlewild Road, which is perceived to be a barrier for bicycling and walking, to get people over to the nature preserve. So with that in mind, the town reached out to CRTPO, applied for some funding, and was able to obtain some funding through the CRTPO for this planning study with an additional local match. And again, this draft recommendations were already presented to the board back in late February. And next slide, please. This slide just shows an overview of the study area, the target study area extended along Idlewild Road, basically from Stallings Road up to NC51, Matthews Mint Hill Road. And then the big green area on the map shows Stevens Creek Nature Preserve. Next slide, please. As part of the study process started in the spring of 2019, we did hold a variety of public outreach events, including 2 public input meetings. We worked with the steering committee and held 2 different steering committee meetings. And then we also did additional outreach meetings with the neighborhood of Windrow, and several of the board members were also able to be present at the last meeting with Windrow residents in January. We have also since presented to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee in February prior to that draft presentation to the board on February 24th. And next slide, please. As part of the study process and through reviewing existing plans and currently existing conditions on some of Town of Matthews facilities, it appears that there's a strong desire for safe, well-separated bicycling and walking facilities. So generally a side path or a multi-use path appears to be the preferred standard of facility type that really provides that safe and inviting place for families, for people of all ages to walk and bicycle. So that appears to be the backbone of a lot of our recommendations emerging out of the study. And next slide, please. This slide just shows a listing of the recommendations in the Town of Matthews. And I believe that as one of the handouts shared with the board members prior to tonight was the summary fact sheets for the project recommendations. Those should have a little bit more detail about each individual project, but I just want to give a brief highlight today. And again, this information was already presented back in February. So Idlewild Road Side Path would probably be the #1 target project because it would connect or close the gap between side path links that would already be implemented through NCDOT projects, the funded project on Idlewild Road, U4913. And then there's another project on NC51 that would also include a side path along Matthews Mint Hill Road. Next slide, please. So this is a highlight of some of the features of the Idlewild Road side path that this plan is recommending. It would be a 10-foot wide facility similar to Sam Newell multi-use path that's currently going through design and public input. It would be offset from the road by about 8 feet to 8.5 feet.
Liuba, can I ask a question, please?
Sure, please go ahead.
It's a little bit difficult with the Zoom, et cetera, but if we can back up one slide, is there a color coding on that blue and orange and green and gray? Is there a color coding priority to those recommendations? Or is that just randomly related? It looks like orange is the most important.
There is not a color-coded priority in this list of recommendations, but Idlewild Road Side Path is probably the priority recommendation that we would identify, just because it would, again, connect those two other links that would already be implemented as part of NCDOT
And I was
projects.
thinking that the other orange 51 mid-block crossing in front of Purser Halsey is important. Some of the side paths, the other side paths, are going to be awfully costly, and they make me a little bit scared.
That's an understandable concern. As you all are aware, investment in greenways and multi-use paths is an expensive prospect. However, I do feel like there's a lot of value to the local community from investing in this type of infrastructure. It's likely to attract additional growth and development for the town of Matthews in the long term. And right now, I think that with the social distancing measures, it actually highlights the importance of providing people with this opportunity to walk and bicycle in a safe way, with an opportunity to still be spaced apart from other people who might be walking nearby. So having this wider facility is actually, I think the need is only strengthened during the times like we have now. And then also as a reminder, same as with the Sam Newell multi-use path project that's currently moving forward, the expectation is that some of those projects, the town would be applying for other grant funding opportunities through the CRTPO and STI prioritization to NCDOT. So I wouldn't expect that the town would be undertaking those larger multi-use path projects on its own, but rather, this would be an exercise in terms of positioning for some project implementation through the Complete Streets policy, where if this recommendation is in a locally adopted plan and a roadway project is moving forward, then there shouldn't be a local match for those projects to be implemented. And then the other side would be identifying those standalone projects for grant application through the CRTPO process for discretionary funding or through the SCI prioritization, in which case the town would have to carry a cost of about 20%.
Thank you.
Great. So moving forward with the next slide, please. Here's an additional important recommendation that we'd like to highlight for tonight. As part of the side path implementation on Idlewild, we would like to highlight the intersection of Idlewild and Thompson as an intersection that would need a safer pedestrian crossing improvement implemented. And it could also use probably an additional engineering study to evaluate for realignment to also improve the conditions for motorists. But without this additional evaluation right now, it's you could simply go forward with an implementation of a pedestrian crosswalk with additional high visibility features. Probably a pedestrian hybrid beacon would be recommended in this case. Moving forward, please. So again, the summary fact sheets provided for the projects give a little bit more detail. They share the cost that's expected. The costs were estimated using the NCDOT STI prioritization cost estimation tool. Those are still planning level costs. So again, the specific project costs would probably vary slightly depending on how quickly the town will be pursuing the implementation. And again, the expectation is that for those standalone projects, the town would be applying through the CRTPO processes for additional federal and state dollars. And it is unlikely that the town would be pursuing those larger side path projects on its own. However, for some of the crosswalk improvements, those are more in the range of 50 to 120,000, and those could probably be implemented as standalone projects by the town. There's also an online map of those recommendations available at bit.ly/walk to Stevens Creek, where W, S, and C have to be capitalized. So this just gives you an overview. The green lines on there are those side paths that we're recommending. And then the little crosswalk symbols, those yellow diamonds are on there to indicate recommended crossings. One of the recommendations on there that's marked as A9, that's a project that would be a new greenway that we wouldn't expect to move forward until that parcel is ready for development. Currently, it's been sitting vacant, and then at the time when there is a developer interested in redeveloping the parcel, it would be in the town's interest to work with them to possibly share in the cost of Greenway implementation. Next slide, please. So if the town were to adopt the study recommendations today, again, one of the biggest benefits would be that you could continue to implement some of the recommendations through the NCDOT Complete Streets policy, which would mean that there would not be a local cost share required for some of those projects when roadway projects move forward. And then the other component would be trying to implement some standalone projects through applying for discretionary funding through the CRTPO and then STI prioritization applications as well. And this slide is just to remind everyone that transportation projects do take a long time to implement. So even after a plan is adopted, there is still prioritization for funding, programming in the STIP, and then preliminary engineering and design, right-of-way acquisition and construction. So it's not expected that any of those recommendations would be implemented immediately. However, there is an opportunity to go ahead and work with NCDOT on implementing some of the recommendations as part of those projects already funded in the STIP. So that's U4913 Idlewild Road improvements, and then the project on NC51 Matthews Mint Hill Road. For example, that mid-block crossing close to the future Percy-Holzer Park entrance, it is possible that the town could work with NCDOT to try and implement a safer pedestrian crossing as part of that NC51 project. With that, I'd like to open it up for comments or questions.
Thank you, Luba. Does anybody have any questions? And again, I can only see 3 or 4 of you, so just jump in. If, there we go. Mayor Pro Tem Garner, did you have a question or comment?
I have a comment. I don't have a question. I'm really excited about this and appreciate all the work that so many people have done to get the surrounding neighborhoods on board with this, as well as moving Matthews into a direction where biking can be more a commonplace and safe for our residents.
Okay. Are there other comments or questions? I have a question, I think, for Hazen. If we adopt this plan tonight, does this obligate us to fund it in any way?
No, sir. No obligations. And those are some of them dollars. If you look at the dollars, they're big dollars.
They're big dollars.
Yes. And so I think the key is just to adopt it. If you have a plan in place, that's when you can move into this full funding mechanism, because you can point to, here's the plan. We as a board took specific action. I think if we don't adopt, there's no threat in my mind, financial or commitment or otherwise, to adopting it. No.
My concern is probably on the thoughts of all the commissioners, and that is that NCDOT is not even finishing projects they've got underway now, and have said they're not buying further right away. They are not even making. There's, I think, 10 roads in our district that aren't even open right now, and may not be open for a while due to lack of funding. So I think it may be a long time before complete roads and all that sort of thing really happens at NCDOT, if ever. So that's why I asked the question. I think DOT is very in deep water right now. Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. However, if we were to adopt a plan and a certain amount of acreage was developed for whatever type of development, whether it's no matter what it is, and we have an adopted plan, they would have to put in the infrastructure such as a sidewalk or a multi-use path parallel or a side path. Hazen, is that correct?
Really is a great point. And think about Idlewild Road. We don't know what the future holds, but there's some very large lots on the Matthews side of that. And to have that plan, it's very easy to point to that and say, look, you got to put in that 10-foot wide side path. You know, we don't need a 5-foot wide sidewalk. It's a nice planning tool for the planning department.
And so that's in our advantage. If we adopt the plan as one or more parcels build out apart from us and they would be obligated to assist in the funding, similar to a deceleration lane or an acceleration lane or a pork chop turn, et cetera. So I, being a proponent of greenways, would like to consider adopting this plan. And although I don't have the information in front of me, I'll make a motion that we adopt this plan.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Miller. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Urban. Before we vote, are there any other questions for either Luba or Corey? Everybody good? I'd like to thank both the consultant and Corey for attending some pretty hardcore neighborhood meetings. Commissioner Urban was there, Mayor Pro Tem Garner was there. I had to congratulate them both at the meeting because they hold their cool so well, because those meetings got pretty intense at times. But I tend to agree with Mayor Pro Tem Garner. This is a well thought out plan. I don't know when we can actually implement it, but it's a nice plan. So I will support it. We'll go ahead and start by calling roll. Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Commissioner Bland.
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner Whitley.
Yes.
That was a very resounding yes. Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Commissioner McCool.
Yes.
And I stated I vote yes as well. So that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I'll try to learn how to say your name more correctly next time.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
you need to adopt the resolution as well.
So we need another another vote.
Yes, please.
I make a motion that we adopt the resolution.
Second.
Is that appropriate?
Motion made by Commissioner Miller, second by Commissioner McCool. Roll call vote again. Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Commissioner Bland.
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley.
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Commissioner McCool.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So again, the resolution passes unanimously. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks again.
All right. I think that does it. We'll go on to new business. Item 13. The first is to receive an update on the Silver Line from CAT Senior Project Manager Andy Mock. Andy?
Yes, Mayor, Council, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I'd like to thank you for inviting me out to your meeting tonight to give you an update on where we are with regard to the Lynx Silver Line. Just to give you, I've never been in front of this body before, and I will be since I'm the Senior Project Manager, I'll be working exclusively on this project for the foreseeable future. So I want to give you a little overview of who I am. I'm the Senior Project Manager for CATS. I've been working on the Lynx system since 2000. So I've worked in some capacity on the Lynx Blue Line and Blue Line extension. And so I'm very fortunate to have that experience. I'm looking forward to deliver the third rapid transit project for CATS for the community. So next slide, Jay.
Andy, this is Hazen. Your video is a little wonky. Just
Okay,
to let you know that.
Thank you. Is it wonky, like it's fading in and out, or just quiet?
Yes, that's what it's doing. But as you got closer, it sounded better to me.
Okay, let me lean in, and if it gets bad, I can just turn my video off. Sometimes that helps. Okay, so this is just a slide to kind of show you kind of a brief agenda, and I will be brief tonight on some of the items and kind of skip over some things that I think y'all probably know. But I just really want to give everyone on the board kind of an overview of kind of how we got here, what is the Silver Line, and how are we moving forward with it. Next slide, please. There we go. So I won't spend too much time on this, but just for everyone's on the same page, this kind of shows the progression of the 2030 transit plan that was adopted back in 2006. Shortly afterwards, we opened the Lynx Blue Line, my first project at CATS. Since then, we've been progressively implementing certain elements such as the streetcar, project or the City Links Gold Line, along with some enhanced bus services along the West Corridor or Wilkinson Boulevard. We've totally re-envisioned our bus system with Envision My Ride. And one of the big things that we did was in 2016, we reevaluated the system plan and included a change in the Southeast Corridor for light rail to Matthews. So that was when the MTC acted and adopted that technology as light rail in the Southeast Corridor. Subsequently, in 2019, the MTC, after another system plan update, acted again and combined the Southeast Corridor, which goes to Matthews, and the West Corridor, which goes to the town of Belmont, into one large project called the Links Silver Line. So that was the combination of two projects into one, creating a very ambitious 26-mile-long project. Also, as part of that, we're also we're also evaluating an alignment that goes to the town of Indian Trail, extending away from CPCC Levine through Stallings and into Indian Trail. Next slide. Always like to show our guiding principles. This is some of the things when we're sitting in meetings trying to, make decisions and think about how we're really putting this and defining this project. We like to make sure that we're really focused on establishing reliable transit that's indicative of a light rail type service that has controlled guideway and can meet a schedule and connect the region. So we're thinking this in a regional lens. We want to use transit to influence and shape growth around stations, but we want to respect community character. And we want to increase mobility in each corridor through effective transit investments. Okay. So one thing to note is I show the Silver Line map, the system map. It's the big purple line. The Silver Line program is really more than just light rail. Light rail is one part of it. There's actually 3 projects in one program. And the Silver Line Design and Environmental Services, they contract that with WSP, and they are doing the heavy engineering of the project and the environmental screening that goes along with a project of this size. Commensurate with that, there's also a transit-oriented development planning study, which really is a parallel study to evaluate land use improvements around stations and also to guide the design team to make sure that we have the benefit of market studies and other land use and kind of softer side evaluation to ensure that we identify where our stations are appropriately and to be most reflective of the community's needs and desires. And then there's also a rail trail study which seeks to identify a vision of a rail trail side path similar to the one in Southend, which is very, very popular, that goes the entire length of the Links Silver Line. We would seek to build as much of that rail trail as possible with the Silver Line, but we'll have to get into the details to see exactly where it lays as it relates to the scope. Next slide, please. So just briefly, I won't get into the details here, but the environmental and design contract, this is the engineering contract. The big activities that we have going on is environmental screening and survey, and design criteria updates. All this is kind of some early work. This is the first phase, which I'll talk about phases a little bit later. So this is all the predecessor work necessary to make sure that we can move into the engineering phase appropriately. Then the follow-on engineering at a 15, 30, and 65% design. Risk assessments, stakeholder engagement, and public involvement is very, very important to this project. Related to the TOD study, that's really looking at those kind of the secondary benefits of a rapid transit project and how can it help the community? It's more kind of community-based and vision-based and less engineering. And so these are kind of some of the things we're looking at to expand opportunities and enhance character, encourage transit-supported development, and improve mobility. Okay, next slide. Thank you. And then the rail trail is, we're going to be looking for that continuous path in any way that we can kind of figure out a concept where we can deliver as much of that as possible with the Silver Line, we would seek to do that, and also develop some kind of unique branding opportunities like has been done in the South End. Okay, next slide. So one of the our phase one early work, and this is part of the design contract, the three main things that we're focused on during this time is stakeholder engagement, public involvement, and alignment refinement. And really the goal coming out of this first phase is to ensure that at the end of the first phase, we have a project that we feel comfortable taking into an engineering, more of an advanced engineering phase, really in heading ourselves to seek federal funding and with an eye towards implementation and operations and construction, really getting into like with a philosophy of project delivery. Okay, next slide. As you can imagine, on our project, the size of the Silver Line, 26 miles, we have a lot of stakeholders. We've spent the last couple months meeting with folks, meeting with town staff in Matthews, town staff in Belmont, Stallings, Indian Trail, the hospitals, the many colleges and universities, the airport, the freight railroad carriers, private developers up and down the line. Really doing a series of kind of interviews and listening sessions to kind of get at what do our stakeholders see the benefits of the Silver Line to be. And then we can, as we start to define the actual project, how can we best define the project to meet our stakeholders' expectations and goals of benefits. Okay, next slide. Public involvement is really critical because this project is a FTA. We intended this project to be an FTA funded project. We would have to go through NEPA, or National Environmental Policy Act, which has a lot of strict standards for public engagement. Unfortunately, we were right in the middle of our first round of public engagement when the COVID-19 crisis struck. So we were only able to have two of our first round of public meetings. One was in the town of Matthews, very well received. I recall we had 80 some people attended, all very positive. And we had one in Uptown Charlotte at the library that had about the same amount of people. So we had a very, very positive. We had a survey issued that we collected data for people's priorities and kind of getting to kind of what do the community really want to get out of the Silver Line. And the big things that the community really kind of got to is they really want to improve connections to major destinations. They really want to connect to the airport. And they really want a competitive travel time. So they want fast, reliable transit to major destinations. So when I say refining the alignment, really what I mean is it's really taking and just to really kind of maybe simplify it as much as I can, to take the big fat purple line that was adopted and really get that down to a lot more detail about what does that purple line mean? What side of the street is it? Where are the bridges and where are the walls and exactly where are the stations? And so that's really getting into a level of specificity that hasn't really been done before. So when some people might say, well, you had an alignment in 2016, why don't you just go build the thing? So one of our first things that we really need to do is really give that alignment a rigorous review with engineering evaluation and land use coordination to really understand what has changed since 2016. That's almost 5 years of buildings being built and new communities and populations which may have different opinions of what the station is and where the alignment should be. Also, any environmental considerations that weren't taken into account before, such as historic buildings or endangered species, and communities that maybe have special protections that we need to evaluate over the entire length of the project. One other major thing is also lessons learned from the Blue Line. Many people on the Silver Line team, such as myself, had worked on the Blue Line extension for years and years. I worked on the Blue Line extension for over 15 years. And so we learned a lot about light rail construction, operations, and planning and design. And so we really wanted to take the advantage of those people coming off that major project and apply those best practices to the Silver Line to ensure that we have the best project possible to compete for federal funds for implementation. Next slide. So since we kicked off the project, I kind of give a brief timeline of what we've been up to. We had to kick off with all of our stakeholders, including Town of Matthews staff, in January. And that was really a review of what the project is, and also start to look at some of those issues with the locally preferred alternative and to identify any benefits and risks and opportunities that the LPA did not hit, or there's risks outstanding that we would like to mitigate, to really look at where are the areas that we think make good sense to evaluate different alternatives from locally preferred alternative. Now, I always want to say that the locally preferred alternative is still the locally preferred alternative by the MTC, and there is no other direction at this point. However, we do know that there are some risks with the locally preferred alternative that we really wanted to evaluate to make sure that we have the best project possible. And so that kind of led us to a first alignment refinement workshop that we had in February. And that was really to look at the LPA, the locally preferred alternative, and identify those options based on that review. We also had all those series of stakeholder engagement sessions really to kind of understand folks' expectations for the project and just make sure that we can try to meet them. Then we had our first round of public meetings in March, which was unfortunately was truncated. We had a steering team meeting in April to identify the alignments that are under evaluation, and then we're continuing those. We're continuing virtual public engagement with community groups. We had a MORA community group a couple weeks ago where we did a truncated presentation with the project team, and we answered all their questions and gave them a personal presentation. And we do those on a weekly basis. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk about some of the options that are kind of on the table in Matthews. So you see there's a lot of lines here, and I don't intend to go into the details of all these lines on this call, but really they kind of boil down into kind of three alignments that are under evaluation with sub options or options that we're evaluating. Option one is the locally preferred alternative, and that comes from Monroe Road and then crosses near 51 and comes down Sam Newell through the hospital. Thank you, Jay. Through the hospital campus, out along Matthews Street, through the ENT and past the Sportsplex, and then off in the CPCC. So that is the locally preferred alternative. We in review of the Matthews Downtown Mobility Study, we noted that there was a desire to evaluate another alternative, which was Matthews Street. So we have added Matthews Street, and that shows as item, or that is 3, I believe. Well, then that is, 3. And that comes down Monroe Road, transitions similar to the LPA, somehow past 51. We'll have to solve for that. And then comes along Matthews Street, crosses Trade Street, and then follows Matthews Street out towards the ENT, similar to the other alternative, to the locally preferred alternative, and then follows ENT through the Sportsplex and out towards CPCC.
Andy, what does LPA stand for, please?
It is the locally preferred alternative. It is the MTC, our governing board. That is our formal direction of what the alignment, the adopted alignment.
Not the Lat Purser alternative.
No.
Okay.
No.
And just for the record, the board, whatever went on record, that LPA, Jason Lawrence kind of stepped us through that.
Right.
Maybe 4 years ago. I don't know. Time goes by so fast. But
Yep.
Okay. Got it.
And so the third alternative, and you see several different lines making that up, and those are nuances that we will be evaluating through our engineering evaluation, is an alternative that parallels CSX Railroad. There are some concerns with that, and those concerns as it relates to risks and uncertainties will be evaluated in the upcoming phase of alignment evaluation. So is there any questions about this? These lines are all subject to change and are part of a review that includes Town of Matthews staff at the table with the project team.
Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. Andy, in the little that I know about the Blue Line, a lot of it was parallel to an old railroad line, and therefore the CSX is going to go along a backyard line of old railroad. Do you foresee any fatal flaws in CSX?
Well, CSX, there may be, especially in downtown Matthews, right at Trade. Downtown Matthews is a historic district. And so there would be, if we were not able to develop an alternative that could not fit within the character of the historic district, or that impacted historic buildings, that might be a fatal flaw. That would be something that would be very concerning. Also, just practically, entering into a railroad right away is challenging in itself. And we would, if the CSX alternative were within their right of way, we would have to have a operating, construction, and real estate agreement with CSX Railroad, which would introduce risk and uncertainty. We did that successfully with the Norfolk Southern line on the Blue Line extension. I was part of that process. That is a challenging process. So that would that's part of our evaluation when it comes to risks and uncertainties, that we would have to kind of acknowledge that uncertainty going into it.
Thank you.
No problem. So let's go to the next slide. This is kind of what's on the table now. Let's kind of go to the next, and that kind of walks us through our next steps. So where we are right now, we have just completed what we're calling the urban design workshops, and that's really focused on transit-oriented development, or TOD related metrics. And really, what is the market potential around these stations for land use improvements that improve the town and the light rail transit as well. So while we're setting ourselves up for a second alignment refinement workshop, really, which that is in a nutshell, is to shortlist the many alternatives, to really take this down from 5 or 6 different alternatives. And this is over 26 miles, so this is not just a Matthews-centric issue. This is a Silver Line end-to-end issue that we're evaluating. So we're going to be layering in details from engineering and risk, and then kind of a harder side and operating issues, harder side evaluation into our decision making, and developing a recommendation for a short list. And so that would take it down from 5 alternatives to however many we come up with. We would then present that to the steering team, with which the Matthews town manager sits on, and provide and hopefully receive direction that's acceptable. Then we would spend the next month and a half to 2 months with stakeholder or the outreach to local officials, including the town of Belmont, Indian Trail, Stallings, Matthews, City of Charlotte, any stakeholders, just to make sure that everyone understands and is comfortable with the direction we're going as far as the short list. We don't want anyone to see the lines for the first time at a public meeting. And then we have our next round of public meetings in September of this year, in which we'll present the short list of options to the public for input. From there, after we have public input, we would then do a kind of a similar kind of iterative process of refining that alignment down. And hopefully at the end of this, at the end of round 3, which will be in the November, December timeframe, will be to have an updated locally preferred alternative, or we will reaffirm the locally preferred alternative as directed by or adopted by that MTC, and then we will take that back to the MTC in February of 2021. One note is that we would like, similar to before, some sort of resolution, or it would be appropriate, I think, to have a resolution from the town before we get back to the MTC. That was something that has been discussed. So I don't think is there a slide after this, Jay? There we go. So with that, I maybe hand off to any other questions you might have.
I'd like to thank you, Andy, for coming tonight and doing this presentation. Came at my behest, and I appreciate it. Looks like we have a question from Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. Andy, on slide 7, I noticed there was a stop located at Conference Drive, which is the new overpass between Monroe Road and Idlewild. I manage 102 condos over there, and that would add, in my own curiosity, a lot of value added. It's near the Meridian, I think, is what the apartment complex is. Do you know if it looks like it's on the Monroe side of Idlewild Road. Is that yet to be determined at this point? The alignment?
I mean, what I can say is what the locally preferred alternative, we did have a station at conference. I will say that we're doing a deep dive on the entire alignment as it relates to Independence Boulevard with a review of all the new work and the new design that NCDOT has done to ensure that our alignment and stations are consistent with the projects that are in varying states of delivery. So I'd say we will know more within the next month of some level of specificity on those alignments. And I can probably give you a better answer in the end of the summer.
And a completion date of what decade or year should I write down?
So our goal, the goal that has been articulated by CATS is 2030. Many decisions between now and then will drive the acquiring that date or hitting that date. So that is our goal, and that's what we're shooting for.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Jeff will be old man by that time.
I know.
and David Bland too.
We all will be.
Yeah, only Ken and Renee will be able to still be in that prime.
Wear them down.
Well, Andy, again, thank you very much for your presentation. It's much appreciated, and I'm sure we'll have you back at some point to.
Look forward to it. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Let's move on to item 13B, receive the monthly budget report from Beth Blair.
Yes, good evening. Good evening to the mayor and to the commissioners. I'll make this short and sweet. I'm sure we're all getting a little weary at this point. This is the report through April, which is the first 10 months of the year, and we're at revenue-wise in the general fund about $20.7 million, which is 75% of our budget for the year, which is pretty comparable to the prior year. We were at 77%. And the expenditures are at $19 million for this year, which is at 69.4% versus we were at 81% last year. I will say that we have within Public Works, they have almost $2.7 million for street enhancements that CJ expects to spend all of it this year, and to date that only $100,000 has been spent. The work is underway. He expects the work to be done before the end of the year. So that's the major reason why the expenditures are trending lower this year than last year, is the timing of the street work. The tourism fund revenues were $20,000 more than expenditures year to date. And my projections, I've done some detailed projections for the year, and I think we'll end in the general fund with probably, I'm approximating about 200,000 addition to the general fund balance. As we talked before, our fund balance as of the end of 19 was 45.5%. And that was the case for 18, and it's going to be in that same range for the end of fiscal 20, which, as we said, is about 4 months of expenditures in reserve in our fund balance. So and year to date, the fiscal impact in the general fund we're 1.6 million revenues greater than expenditures. But again, the majority of that is the timing of the streets projects. Any questions?
Beth, are you in your office at Town Hall?
Yes.
I can tell from the picture behind you. So you're really burning the midnight oil. Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Anybody have any questions on the budget for Beth?
What are you said you were sort of running some hypotheticals or looking at this.
Yes.
What were some of the scenarios you're looking at? Were you looking at sales tax dropping off for
Sure.
April, March, May, June, anything like
Yes.
that? What were your scenarios?
I did very in-depth, you can see this humongous spreadsheet. We did a lot of research, or I did a lot of research looking into what the county projections were. They have an economist on staff at the county. Then the North Carolina League of Municipalities puts out their projections. So I used their projections not only for this year and next year, and we also talked to all of the most of the neighboring towns in Mecklenburg County, what their assumptions were. So trying to get and obviously looking at history of the town. So with that being said, I did a detailed projection, took the actual expenditures and revenues through April, and then forecasting the May and June activity based on the variables as I just went through, both for revenues to come up with the projection for this year, as well as how the fiscal 21 revenue projections were done. Excuse me. And as you suggest, John, that certainly at sales tax, the investment earnings, the tourism funds for like occupancy, rental car tax, those have really taken a big hit. Something that just came up in the last couple weeks, as you probably read, that they have let folks delay paying their vehicle tax. You have up to 5 months from the date. So that is impacting the revenues, excuse me, for vehicle taxes to be received this year. But good news is the expectation is that they will be paid in fiscal 21 because of the delay. So it's not a loss of revenue, it's just timing of when we'll receive those revenues. So yeah, a lot of work and effort, and I went through every department and again did the same thing on the expenditure side, looked at the expenditures through April, and forecasted May and June. Obviously, the Corey's departments have, as far as expenditures, are going to be down, as is the revenue, because we, a month or so ago, thought that perhaps some camp activity could be done this fiscal year, but then have since decided that nothing will occur until at the earliest July 1st. So as we progress through the coronavirus situation, we keep reassessing the situation. So it's been a very detailed process and using the best knowledge. And another example is that we collect fees in lieu for different projects, and we were expecting almost $200,000 for the Mount Harmony Townhouse project this year, but the latest projection is that won't come to fruition until fiscal 21. That's earmarked for specific purpose, like a park or something like that. But there things have been pushed out into the next fiscal year in some cases, as I've suggested.
Thank you.
Sounds like
Any
you've done
other
a very thorough job. Are there other questions or comments for Beth?
I'm impressed with her reporting and her dedication.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's been a learning process, and certainly this year with the unprecedented coronavirus, it's made it even more challenging to estimate, because you don't really have much history, because it's unusual, even different than the dip in the economy back in 2008, 2009.
Thank you for all you do.
We appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Yes.
We will now move on. If there are no further questions or comments, we'll move on to agenda item 13C, receive an update on NCDOT road projects from Mr. CJ O'Neill.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you asking me for an update on these projects. As you are aware, most likely DOT has had a short fund. This is partially due to COVID and also partially due to some of the issues that they had earlier with the hurricane and with some other things that they had to pay because of litigation. What that did is that brought them down below their $300 million floor, and they've basically decided to halt all the projects that they can. So on the next page is a table that Dana Stujenki put together, and I appreciate it. It's very thorough and a little bit complicated, so I actually have to talk you through it rather than you guys just reading and I go home and sleep. So if you don't mind, I guess let me go through it the easy way. The items in purple are the ones currently on the moving forward list. So those are the only projects in this area that are currently moving forward, with a couple small exceptions. I'll get to those in a minute. I-5507, that's 45's Express Lanes project that is currently under construction. That is along with the R0211, which is part of that project, and the U47 or 4714AB, which is redoing the the John Street Bridge as part of the 485 project. So those three are in construction. U4713A, that's a McKee Road extension that's currently in design and is still scheduled to be let in 2021. U2509A and B, that's the 74 widening project and express lanes and then the parallel roads. Those are in design right now, but we are unsure whether that will move forward to be let at the 2022 and 2023 dates that are currently in the tip. Almost all the rest of the projects are now being delayed. One exception is C5613D. That's the Sam Newell Road multi-use path or side path. We are allowed to go to 25% design on that, and then it's going to be put on hold. They didn't want to stop it midway through design and not have a clear stopping point. The other project that is currently still going, and I know you have questions about, is the South Trade Street project, the widening that's been going on for quite a long time now. They are saying that it still should be done by the summer. Some of the things that have gone on that have caused delays, originally when it was first designed, Charlotte Water said that they would not have to move a sanitary sewer line. So they went through all the design permitting and went to construction on that. And then Charlotte changed her mind and said, no, you have to move the sewer line that runs underneath the culvert. So that caused a large delay in it. Later on, once they started construction again, they've had a lot of issues with the weather. Working a creek like that, anytime you get rain, the creek rises, it gets saturated, and you have to wait several days for it to dry out. And it seems like every time that happens, it rains again just shortly after it dries out. The most recent thing that happened that delayed this, they were having to put a relocate a water line temporarily during construction. And before they did that, they were digging the storm sewer system and found that there was a gas line that was, their locates that were done were 11 feet off. So when we go in the field and mark locates, it's supposed to be within 2 feet in either direction. And that's what they based their design on and their changes. When they went out and actually started digging, it was 11 feet off and was right in line with where the new water line was supposed to go. So they have just finished working through that and now should be getting back to construction again once the weather allows them. So that's the current update on the projects.
CJ, is someone from your office contacting DOT on a regular basis concerning the South Trade Street Bridge? Because I recall having a similar conversation this time last year. We were told it will be done this summer, and here we are to the next summer. And I don't know how many years that project's been going on, but I think, and along with others on the council, are getting phone calls and emails and texts from angry residents saying, "My gosh, we could go up there with pickaxes and build a bridge ourselves in this amount of time." So, do you have any? What's your confidence level? This is going to be done by summer, and are we actively staying on top of folks to get them to complete the project?
So my confidence is not high that it'll be done this summer.
Mine isn't either.
Yeah, Susan, she goes to all their construction meetings that they have now. So she's out there meeting with them weekly on site.
Great. Commissioner Miller, did you have a question?
I do. I have a couple. CJ, on your slide on the window right now, there are 5 no's under suspended list. On the far left column, there are 5 more no's that they are not suspended, but they are not in purple. Does that mean they are going forward, or they're in purgatory, limbo, whatever?
So the yeses and nos in the first column, that is a little confusing. Those were as of November. That was the first time that we had delays in projects, was in November, and so those were as of November. The ones in purple are as of May. So the purple is the most up to date.
All right. So the ones in the bottom that say no are yet to be determined, so to speak?
They're currently on hold.
And my second question is regarding even when they do complete a 4-lane bridge, then they are going to start the continuation of the greenway through a newly drilled tunnel underneath that bridge. Will it disrupt any of the traffic while they're drilling the tunnel underneath the bridge? And B, will it be drilled from the west side of the bridge rather than the residential side of the bridge?
Sorry, I think my light is going out. So to answer your first question, I'll never say never, but it is being designed so that it will not disrupt traffic. As far as from which side it will go, that will likely be left up to the contractor to decide which direction they go.
Well, they've already graded, and the house is ready to put up a fence on the east side, which is my side, or rather the Brenham Lane side of the street. Yet there is a nice, concrete mount with a hole, and I haven't seen the opposing side, but I would hate to think that they're going to bring in more construction after they've graded and seeded the Brenham Lane side. So that is a concern of mine that might need some follow-up. If you could ask or forward that idea question to Susan, please.
Sure. So they are not going to start design on the tunnel until the construction is finished with the current culvert widening. or lengthening. So by the time that the design is done and they start construction on the Greenway Tunnel, both sides will be fully stabilized and grassed.
Commissioner Miller, let me suggest that we'll be riding on the Silver Line before we see a tunnel under that bridge, probably.
Government at its finest.
Yeah, that's been a pretty problematic project for sure. Are there other questions? Did I hear somebody else chime in?
Mayor, can I add one more thing? I'm sorry, I just got a text from Susan. She meets with them monthly. I'm sorry, I thought it was weekly.
That's great. Thank you. You know, I think we probably need to look at our agendas a little more carefully. It seems like we put CJ at very last almost every time, so we appreciate you hanging in there, CJ, and it was a good update. The one comment I have is I'm a little surprised that McKee Road extension project is still green-lighted. That's a little bit surprising. After we sat in the last CARTPO meeting and saw, Brett Knight talk about how dire things were, they had no money at all to do anything. So it's surprising that project's going forward.
I'll say it's going forward at this point. What happens in the future, we don't know.
Okay, if we don't have any other questions or comments, we want to thank CJ and we'll move on to item 13D. Remember, we added that item at the beginning of the meeting, not realizing we would be here maybe this long, but it was to have a quick discussion about having in-person meetings, particularly perhaps budget meetings. Hazen, are you going to take this?
Obviously, it's up to the board. I mean, I think some folks may be uncomfortable meeting in person even now, and I think if those folks want to be at home, I think that's fine. Mayor, if you want to come, we can make accommodations for X amount of people. I think the interesting thing, and this is all coming up pretty quickly, is how do you make it for the public that is safe and does the social distancing, and the masking's not hard to do, but I think we need some time. I think we got to think it through how to make it safe. But I think the question really tonight would be, where's the board at from a comfort standpoint on going, first meeting in July, first meeting in June. So I think that's the question. If y'all say, look, here's when we want to get going, then I think we can pull a plan together.
Let me just comment. I think from my perspective, and there's been kind of a love affair with Zoom and GoToMeeting, et cetera, I find these meetings a little bit awkward and not quite as effective as when we meet in person. I would like to meet in person as soon as possible with appropriate social distancing, et cetera. Commissioner McCool, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I would agree with you there. As soon as possible. I don't think we can, everyone gets out their full viewpoint on every item. And I think this kind of restricts an open dialogue a little bit. So I want to get back to work as soon as possible and get some.
Commissioner Bland.
I want to say, I think we're trying to forecast the weather. Like we're going to say what we're going to do a month out. I just think that it's, number one, from what I heard today, we're having record numbers of new cases coming in the state. People get sick. Mecklenburg County is nowhere close to, we just heard the guy say we're having a record number of cases here in Mecklenburg. I'm not interested in going back earlier. I want to be sure that it's safe and healthy. I know everybody's sick of being pent up. I am too. I'm so sick of it, I could die. Surely we're not as effective as we are when we can meet together. But I just don't think that because we don't like the medicine, I don't think we need to stop taking the medicine. You know what I'm saying? It tastes bad. I agree. But, I think we need to be, I sit there and watch on TV and people act like this is over. It's not over. And it's got me concerned.
I agree that it's not over, but I think we need a plan for an eventual regrouping. And Commissioner Bland, if you're not comfortable, we can make accommodations for you to not have to be there in person. I'd like to hear from everybody on the board where you stand on this. Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. Like we did the last time in person, where we were about 6 feet apart on the dais and 6 feet apart in the front, and then every other row or whatever it is in the back. And I would feel comfortable with that and doing masks. And if someone's not comfortable, they could Zoom in or partake in a video conference style. I think we need to get back to it. I'm comfortable with it, with a mask and social distancing. As far as the citizen participation, maybe they could line up in the lobby if they so desire and step into a microphone in the doorway, and 5 or 10 could be allowed in, however many are allowed according to phase 2. I support getting it back to normal.
Commissioner Urban, do you have a viewpoint?
I definitely respect where Dave's coming from, but I think that the virus is not going away. Even with a vaccine, there will be people that refuse to take the vaccine. So the bottom line is we need to go ahead and make preparations for those who wish to return to the dais, and for those people who wish to continue to remote access. That includes the public as well. And so it's better laid to make the plans now. It'll take Hazen some time. It's probably unrealistic to say June, because June is just days away. But I think we should at least try all haste for July, and then make accommodations for both commissioners that want to do it via remotely and want to be on the dais. I think Jeff's absolutely right. We took out every other chair. We had people on the floor. There was adequate distancing. And I think that's just a prudent way to approach it at this time.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner, do you have an opinion on this?
I think at this time, it's very difficult for us to know what's going to happen. And as I see the numbers going up just 2 weeks to the day from when phase 1 started easing, we are going to see in another 2 weeks another upswing. I know that, Jeff, you keep saying, well, if you look at the percentages, well, Mecklenburg County was at 7% and now they're at 10% positives. So the case numbers are going up on a percentage basis, not just because tests are going up. I feel like our budget would be easier to work through in person. And I think we can do that in a way similar to what Pineville has done, but I'm not comfortable saying June or July for our meetings until we can see what the trends are, because we're seeing them go up, and we're seeing our businesses around town being packed every night. We're going to see bigger and bigger numbers. We have to be the example, and we have to be the ones that are overly cautious, whether we want to or not, because we're setting an example for our community and we're creating the standards that we hope our community will adhere to.
Thank you. Commissioner Whitley, do you have an opinion on this?
Yeah, I do. I think that when we close, as Jeff stated in his statement, we had social distancing at that particular time. I know in this phase 2, the governor order says that if we're going to have a meeting on the inside, that we have 10. So I think we can limit the public to 10, and the board, as we did our last time, distancing 6 feet, sitting around and with masks. And the way I would say that you just only sit 10 or 15 chairs out in the audience and have those already spaced, so that no doubt that they will be there. But I think you need to mark the bathrooms, and no more than 2 people in the bathroom at a time, no more than 2 people on the elevator at a time, and just they leave and come at a time as they come in. But I really think that, as John Irvin was saying too, the virus is with us, and the numbers are going up simply because we are doing more testing. And I was reading somewhere that 75% of the country is probably infected already, but there's a lot of asymptomatic that don't show any effect. So we all don't know whether we're affected or not until we be tested, and until we can get tested. So make a long story, I think we can move forward within a month, maybe coming back, but set it up. At some point, the town employees, is what I heard from Chief Kenneberg, saying that the town is going to start opening back up. So the town employees going to have to start coming back doing some kind of social distancing. So I'm in favor of somewhere in about a month. Let's see if we can get back into town and see what the numbers is. But we got to get back to meeting and doing this. This is fine, but it's not like being in person where we can move pretty much and interact. So I'm in favor of somewhere in July. Let's see if we can get back to town hall with some things in place. Set it up, mark it where 6 feet, give them 7 feet. Just that ice and all that is comfortable to give them a little extra room for those sitting out in the audience.
Can I ask a question, Hazen?
Go ahead.
Hazen, when Rob said, referred, or might have been you, that you're reopening town hall, what are your precautions on getting back to work, please?
So, well, first of all, town hall is open, or the town really is open for business. But a lot of people have been very productive at home, and they like working at home because they're not being interrupted as much at home. So we made that a department head decision. If your employees can be just as productive at home, we're okay with that. Realizing that even like over on our side, people are going to circulate in and out. We take our temperatures every time we come back into the building. There's a temperature gauge down there. We read a little sheet to make sure, we answer no to all the questions.
That's forehead temperature?
Yep.
Not another method?
No.
No. And I think I'm interested. It's going to take I think it's going to take a little time. Like, okay, if you can only allow 10 people in the building, and maybe you can argue, look, governments are exempt from this, using Renee's leading by example. We probably need to be careful, but we also have a public duty, right? We can't, in my mind, you can't you're number 11, skedaddle. No, that's not. So I think we got to figure out, how do you create public participation? And we have figured it out with Zoom, thankfully. Is it a combination of the two? But I think that'll take a little bit of time. But to Lori and Becky and others, and Tanya, others credit, we have done a lot of research, kind of keeping at the cutting edge of a lot of this stuff. This is another example. And then we can bring you back a plan, and then really y'all can decide, okay, here's when we want to implement it, when whatever, July or end of August, end of June or whatever.
Will you take the commissioner's temperature as we come back to?
We're going to use the Higdon method, I think, when we.
Well, see, I won't have no problem in say if under this phase 2, if we have 10 in the public gathering, we would take those 10 and still keep Zoom, but at the same time, as the first sign up, just like on the sheet, so that we can stay within the governor's order. The first 10 that sign up said they want to come publicly, let them be and take their temperature, take everybody's temperature, keep them social distance, where they're sitting, and section off the bathroom, 2 in at a time, and then go from there. Because I know people coming into town hall now, do y'all take the temperature for them that's coming in?
Yes.
Somebody coming into the, I'm sorry.
Well, I just wanted to say, yes, sir, we do. And John, we comment, we didn't.
Can you hear me now?
Barely.
Really?
Okay, I don't know what's going on. It's done this once before. Comment I wanted to make is a couple things. First, there's as I look at us right now that have the cameras on, there are 10 of us right now, without Lori, without anybody else. So we would probably exceed 10 people in the room, just maybe, at least 10 of us and maybe 10 more, or whatever. So that would be a concern. And the other thing I wanted to say is, I think it's probably prudent to check everyone's temperature. That's not a bad idea, including ours. If we come in, I certainly wouldn't want to be knowingly spreading sickness to my colleagues. So, I think that's a good idea to monitor your own health and at least see if you have a temperature. Now, you could be asymptomatic, as we say. The point that was made tonight that I think is important is I think that we're going to the virus is going to be with us for a long time, and I don't think we can do Zoom meetings this entire set of our entire term. At some point, we're going to have to go back and meet in person. I do respect those that don't want to meet for whatever reason. So if Commissioner Bland or Mayor Pro Tem Garner did not want to come in, we could do some kind of accommodation by Zoom. That's fine. I would like to get back in person, but I think it's maybe a good idea to have staff come back with some sort of plan, and then we could suggest when it might be. I also think if tonight we said, hey, we want to start meeting in person again in July, we can certainly revisit that. If come July, the number of cases in Matthews is up 5-fold, then maybe it's not a good idea to meet in person. But if it's stable or down, maybe it would be better. So we can still monitor the situation, which we certainly are anyway. So Hazen, is that maybe a plan that you could come back with some sort of plan that could accommodate those that don't want to come, as well as those that do, and still do it in some sort of safe manner? Commissioner Miller, do you have a comment?
My question is, I thought it was one person per 1,000 square feet. That would be a 10 by 10 space. And I would ask Hazen to research the governor's second order, because if Walmart can have 100 people or 1,000 people, whatever the number is, I thought that it was per square feet. And if town hall second floor is 15,000 square feet or 20,000 square feet, that would easily accommodate 20. And if they were in different rooms and everyone else was 6 feet away, I think that we're following the rules and wearing masks.
May I interject here?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, the governor's order indicates 10 to an assembly. However, governmental operations are not subject to the limitation of the assembly. The board meeting is a governmental operation. The only thing you would be limited to would be mask and social distancing. There's not a 10 limitation on a board meeting.
Right. But to Mayor Pro Tem Garner's point,
No, I understand that, but we're getting off bounds here, trying to measure the number of people who can attend.
I agree. I know everybody's tired. We've had a long meeting tonight. Why don't we leave it to staff to come back the next week or so and maybe send us some sort of plan on how you think we could accommodate a meeting? It doesn't sound like there's a consensus to meet in person anytime before July. So when is our first meeting in July? Like July 13th or something like that? Commissioner Bland?
No, don't get me wrong. I would meet as much together as everybody else does too. I just think I'm concerned, like you said, about setting a bad example. And I think and everybody said, oh, we're just back to normal. And I am so worried. Maybe, I hope I'm completely wrong, and that come July 1st, everything's back, nobody's getting sicker, the numbers are going down. But everything I'm seeing doesn't show that. And maybe I'm wrong, but
to your point, I don't think we'd be back to normal. We're going to be doing social distancing. We're going to be wearing masks. We're going to limit the number of people who come in the room. It's not like free for all. Let's pack the room out with 250 people with no masks and we're all sitting on top of each other. It would be a very
have to get before we start saying this isn't a good idea. That's the question, in my mind. Donald Trump wants to put 20,000 people packed together, rah, into the Coliseum downtown. Well, maybe that's okay. And you guys may think that's fine. If it is, then that's the vote will be taken and we'll go with it. But I don't think it's safe.
Okay, I can respect that. I also look and watch how many people are in Lowe's and Walmart and Harris Teeter every day, most of which are not wearing masks.
That's right.
I'm not saying that's a good example, but
That's my point.
right. So, I mean,
we'll see.
I think we could do it safely. I think we could do it in a safe manner. Certainly take some precautions. Is it absolutely foolproof? No, but we could. I don't like the idea of continuing these Zoom meetings
indefinitely
ad infinitum forever. I mean, I think they're not particularly. I don't think we're at our best having meetings like this. We are more productive, I think, when we meet in person. And I want to have some sort of plan to transition out of this if the COVID situation allows it. And it sounds like that's the consensus of the board. But again, let's have staff come up with a plan. We'll talk about it, and we're certainly going to monitor. We monitor daily, how many more cases there are. And again, if we see some huge spike, then of course it wouldn't be prudent to start meeting again in person. But we'll see. Right now, to Renee's point, we have seen a slight uptick. So let's see what happens.
Okay.
Commissioner Miller.
The reason for this topic was that I requested, and it doesn't have to be honored, but I requested one more budget meeting because I want to discuss public works versus fire and EMS versus police. And I want to discuss my viewpoints on that. I'd like to present it to this board. I don't think it would take more than 20 minutes, but I'd rather not do it on the night we voted in. If we have to, I will, but I do feel that these Zoom meetings have hampered our discussion, our open dialogue, and I'm in need of a little more information to discuss with the board. And given that we have 3 new board members, they may take it with a grain of salt. They may not really care what I think. It's okay, but I'd like to at least present my case on an opinion about the budget. So the question is, could we have a June 1st short meeting on the budget?
Via Zoom.
Yeah, I guess so. Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we're talking June 1st, I don't think anybody's comfortable meeting that. We don't have a plan. That's just a couple days, right? So,
right, that's okay.
So, yeah, we can certainly schedule another meeting, but it'll likely be, it will be a Zoom meeting, a virtual meeting.
That's fine.
We'll plan on scheduling a meeting June 1st at 6 p.m. if that's okay with the board.
And we'll be doing
dinner be served?
Sorry, did somebody say something?
Will dinner be served? I kind of missed.
I'm sure Penny will put a Pop-Tart in the toaster for me.
Yeah, like tonight it was served.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Who beside me hasn't eaten yet.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, me either, Charlie.
All right, I think we've beaten this horse quite a bit. We'll have staff come back with a plan, and we'll discuss this further at a future meeting. Probably, it sounds like no in-person meetings at least until July. So we'll stay the course and monitor the number of cases, et cetera.
Thank you.
For the next month anyway. We'll move on to item 14, the mayor's report. Again, I just want to reiterate what I said at the top of the meeting regarding Memorial Day. I think a lot of us, some of us participated in the Bookstore American Legion Post 235 event at Stumptown Park. That was nice. Others may have watched something on television or whatever, but I think all of us know a family member or a friend that was in the military that gave the ultimate sacrifice for their country. And I just want to continue the honoring of them as we did on Memorial Day, and hope that we can have a Veterans Day event in November that's held under more healthy circumstances. I hope by then. Let's hope and pray. But I certainly do want to recognize tonight and salute and honor all of our veterans. That's all I have for mayor's report. Hazen, do you have a town manager's report? You look like you're ready to roar, man. Let's go. What you got?
No, sir, we're good.
Okay. Charlie, do you have a attorney's report?
Yes, I have a wonderful report. My report is I have no report.
Great. I think I did that. I believe I did that backwards, but we got it out anyway.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah. We have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
I second that.
And I think everybody seconded it. So I will give the honor to Ken McCool. I will have to call a roll call vote, unfortunately. Commissioner Urban, how do you vote on whether or not to adjourn tonight? Okay. Commissioner Bland?
Yes.
Commissioner Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley?
Can we go back through? Yes.
Oh, no. Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
And Commissioner McCool?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. We'll talk soon.